This summer, Johnsonville reminds everyone to get their sausage family together to enjoy some plump, juicy brats around the grill. Because at Johnsonville, we don't make sausage, we make family and sausage.
National League Central rivals go head-to-head this weekend when the Pirates face the Cubs at Wrigley.
Swing and a miss, he struck him out.
The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNradio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hi there, it's Greeny. Thank you for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Here's what we have for you working today. Jemele Hill and Danny Manning in our studio. Tremendous conversation as we look forward to the Final Four. We talk about the one and dones and visits from Mike Brey and Jay Wright, plus our Final Four picks.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
And we're back and better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests, as always, on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. There'll be a whole bunch of them, most of them in Indy as we get set for the Final Four. And we're calling this a Final Four Friday. And we're going to have a terrific time. My friend Jemele Hill is here. Thank you, Jemele, on short notice for jumping into the chair.
Michael Smith may have a problem with you, though.
Well, here's the thing. We've upgraded Michael. We have upgraded Michael. Michael Smith is one of my favorite people in the world. But the day that he practically single-handedly leads a team to a college basketball championship is the day he can host Final Four Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Danny Manning, now the head coach at Wake Forest, is in with us for the 4 hours this morning as we get set for the Final Four. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Very excited and looking forward to it.
It's going to be terrific. And just watching some of those highlights before, and Jemele, you're old enough to remember, and I'm certainly old enough to remember. I was talking to Danny before the show. I was a junior in college when you led Danny and the Miracles to that national championship in 1988, and it is one of the great runs that any one player has ever had in any tournament, and we'll certainly have plenty of time to talk about that. But I have to believe that when we get around Final Four time, it brings back a lot of memories for you.
A lot of great memories, a lot of fond memories, and just a lot of friendships that roll back into the back of my head, just all the good times we had.
Jemele, if you think about the players, when we look at teams that have won championships and you think about individual stars that have won championships in recent years, you think about like a Carmelo leading Syracuse and some others, but I don't know that there's ever been one player, obviously there probably have, but how many players have ever been more given credit for having led their teams to a championship the way Danny did?
Carmelo's the only one that comes to mind in sort of recent memory, and certainly I think that's where Danny stands alone. And may I just say for the record, you very quickly said, of course, we're both old enough to remember. Yeah. I just want you to know I was a teenager, on the young side of teenagers.
Yeah, but you were old enough to remember it. My point is we have people sitting in our studio who don't remember it. I mean, Steve Cerruti, I think, was born 2 years after Danny Manning won the championship. Who was 13? Ray, you were 13? How old were you, Cerruti, 1988? That's the year he was born. Wow. That's the point that I'm making. Wow. So, we have people in this room who are not old enough to drink yet. So, anyway, so let's get this going. Obviously, Final Four is here, and our stats and information group puts out a packet of information that I've been holding on to all week with the top 5 things to know about the Final Four. So let's run through this. And obviously, at number 1, it begins with Kentucky, 38-0, trying to become the first unbeaten NCAA champion since Indiana in '76. The Wildcats are the 3rd team since then to enter the Final Four unbeaten. Now, you're not old enough to remember, Jemele, but I am. 1979, Indiana State and Larry Bird went all the way to the finals and lost to Magic in the championship game in Michigan State, which you would have celebrated had you known about it. And then UNLV was 34-0 in 1991, went to the Final Four and lost to Duke in a game that I still can't believe happened. So can you, Danny, if you can, obviously you weren't anywhere near in this situation. Yours was a lower-seeded team. But would you think that creates additional pressure on Kentucky going in knowing they're not only playing for this year's championship but for that crack at history?
I think it does to a certain extent. I think right now at the Final Four, all those guys are sitting in their hotel rooms. They've got the TVs on. They've got their smartphones. So they kind of see what's going on. They see us talking about them. They see other people talking about them as well. So back then, when there wasn't as much social media, you could kind of sequester yourself off and kind of eliminate some of that noise, but you definitely hear it now.
Yeah, I would agree that that is an additional element to all of this, because if you think about the scenarios, if they lose at some point this weekend, you know what the volume and what the noise, as he said, will be. It'll be that they're not necessarily overrated, but everybody saw this coming and all this other kind of conversation, even though honestly, if they lose to Wisconsin, is that really an upset? I mean, it is just from an aesthetic standpoint, but Wisconsin's a really good team. And a lot of people believe that they have a legitimate shot to beat Kentucky. And so while that may be the case, looking at how they match up, we all know that that's not how exactly it's going to play out.
Hembo, I don't have the lines in front of me. What's the latest line, particularly on that game? But let me have both. What is it, 5 points? 5 points, a 5-point game. So is that a huge upset? No, it obviously is not. But it does bring up the old standing question. You put together one of the great seasons of all time. You've won 38 games, which has only happened once before, and it was this same Kentucky team that did. That it was Cal and Kentucky in 2012. But if they go out and lose a heartbreaker tomorrow, Frank Kaminsky throws in a shot at the buzzer and beats them, there are going to be people who are going to say their season was a failure. And I suppose that's where you sort of draw the line between their situation, anyone else's. You make the Final Four, any of these other four teams, the three other teams have had a terrific season, have had a terrific run. Michigan State, obviously, playing with house money. For Kentucky, they lose. People are going to say, and I don't think unjustifiably on some level, the way the sports world operates today, that their season is a disappointment.
Yeah, there'll be some people out there that say that. But like you said, if you get to the Final Four, you've had an outstanding season. And the icing on the cake is obviously winning the national championship. But the Final Four is nothing to hang your head down about or be upset about in the long run, because it's always going to be a great memory for you.
Are they better? I mean, are they just a cut above? See, they didn't go back and forth. They beat West Virginia by 39 points on a Thursday night, and we're talking about whether they could make the playoffs in the NBA. And then there's a shot in the air that could beat them 2 days later against Notre Dame. And now all of a sudden, are they really that much better than everybody else? Where is the reality in that question?
I think they have a lot of depth, and they have a lot of players they can throw out at you. But the NCAA tournament is based upon who plays best that particular night or evening, whenever the game is played. And that's the beauty of it. That's when we show all those last-second shots, those buzzer beaters, and those stories that kind of pull on your heartstrings a little bit. It's not a series. If it was a series, Kentucky would win hands down.
Yeah, I don't think the talent gap is really all that wide now that they're there. Probably the least talented team is Michigan State. They don't have the bevy of first-round picks that are obvious at this moment. I'll at least say that. But Kentucky, from when you have the number of McDonald's All-Americans and people who they see as lottery picks, it's kind of hard for people to lend them any excuse, even though last year, they beat Wisconsin by a point?
1 point, yeah.
Yeah, by 1 point. So even though there wasn't that much of a difference in these two teams last year, even if they lose, everybody's going to say, oh, but look at his roster. How could he possibly lose? And it's going to reinforce sort of some old narratives about Kentucky and maybe even John Calipari.
We are Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Last year, over 3 million drivers switched to Progressive. Call or click today. Find out if you could save. Again, top 5 things to know about this weekend's Final Four. That was 1. Here's 2. Kentucky will play Wisconsin in one of the national semifinals, a rematch of last year, the 1-point Kentucky win. This is just the 3rd time that 2 teams will meet in the Final Four in the national semifinals in consecutive years. In each of the previous 2 instances, the same team won both meetings. So history, and it's a very small sample, but history says Kentucky wins again. We'll see if that winds up repeating itself. Top 5 things to know. Number 3, the 4 coaches in the 2015 Final Four have combined to make 25 official appearances in the Final Four, if you include these. Now, again, I keep saying that's a ridiculous number because John Calipari was there twice. That isn't being counted because his Massachusetts run and his Memphis run are vacated, but we all saw them happen. So it's actually 27 appearances. Jemele, obviously, I think one could say this is the most accomplished, well, by those stats anyway, the most accomplished collection of Final Four coaches that we've ever seen.
A question that came to mind when I was just thinking about this Final Four field was, which coach would you rather have of this foursome? And that's a really tough question to answer because they all have different styles. They've all been successful in their own right. They all bring things to the table. Obviously, I'm biased because I went to Michigan State, so of course I would probably take Tom Izzo. But when you look at not just their accomplishment, but the impact that they've had on the game and how they develop players, this is really one of the more outstanding groups that we've ever seen.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, absolutely. This is a great coaching Final Four group. I mean, you look at the history, the tradition that they've built at the schools that they're at is outstanding. And I'm looking forward to seeing those coaching matchups and those wrinkles and changes they make during timeouts and at halftime.
Bo Ryan is the guy. The other 3 have been on the scene for what feels like forever. Calipari going back to Marcus Camby and UMass. And, I mean, he's such a almost a larger-than-life figure. Coach K is obviously the icon. Tom Izzo has basically made himself an icon also. They're going to put a statue of him in front of his building. And Bo Ryan is one of those lifers. You know, Bo Ryan's a guy who's been coaching forever, and nobody knew it, coaching in smaller divisions and smaller schools and building himself up to this moment. So this has a little bit. I remember when John Beilein and Michigan made the championship game a couple of years ago, and that was another one. I remember all the stories about him coaching in high school and all the rest of that. That's kind of who Bo Ryan is, right, Danny? Tell us a little bit. Bo Ryan is obviously the least known of this group of coaches. What makes him such a great coach?
Well, I think he recruits players that fit his system very well, and I think if you look at their stats, Kaminsky's having an outstanding run in this tournament right now. Decker's playing great, and Hayes is being solid. Decker and Kaminsky probably lifted their scoring average a few points than what it was in the regular season, and that's the beauty of the NCAA tournament. Guys have a chance to step out on a big platform, a big stage, and kind of elevate what they've been doing all year long in a team concept.
You know, we had Kaminsky on the other day, Jemele, and I asked him, I said, people say Bo Ryan is funny. He's been on our show a million times, and we got into one argument with him once years ago, but I like Bo Ryan. He's a terrific coach, obviously. Not only have I never heard him say anything funny, I've never seen him smile.
Yeah.
So I can't picture it, but they say he's actually him and Bill Belichick are the two people that the people who know them say they're actually very funny in person. But I can't picture him being
can't either.
funny.
They do say that a lot about Bill Belichick, that, you know, he's just a riot and he has a great sense of humor. I'm like, when? I don't even know what he looks like when he's happy. Bo Ryan is one of those guys. He's had an interesting reputation in the Big Ten. I think a lot of people are rubbed the wrong way at times by him, but over time, I think they've come to understand and accept his quirks. And so of the group, he's definitely the more underrated. But I would love to see him crack a joke or be funny, because I'm wondering, what is that like?
Is he funny, Danny? You go to these coaches' conventions, is he funny?
He is funny. He is a funny guy.
Give me one example of
a lot of one-liners.
Funny.
He's a lot of one-liners. He doesn't come out with a long, elaborated story, but he has something really sharp and quick to say a lot of times.
Like by one-liners, I mean, like are we Henny Youngman? I mean, what do you mean by could I have picked a more ridiculously dated reference? Take my wife, please. Who would be a current one-liner kind of comic? I don't even know. The point of it is, he's actually funny. He's getting up there saying funny things.
He is. You know, the conversations he has with different coaches, and when you run into him, he has some very clever, unique things to say.
All right, Mike and Mike, the top 5 things you need to know about this weekend's Final Four. At number 4, Mike Krzyzewski has won 4 championships as a head coach. That ties him with Adolph Rupp for second most all time. A title this season would put him alone in second place, and of course have him only halfway to John Wooden, who won his 10 championships at UCLA. Now, I will never, ever do anything to diminish the legacy of John Wooden. John Wooden deserves his place as not only one of the greatest coaches of all time, but one of the most beloved figures in sports history. It is worth pointing out that in 1975, when John Wooden won the last of his 10 championships, that was the year the tournament field expanded to 32 teams, okay? So when they were winning championships, the extraordinarily random nature of winning championships in college basketball, which to me is both the best thing and the worst thing about the sport. The tournament is the best thing we have, but it's the worst way to pick a champion. In the days that Wooden was coaching at UCLA, it was much truer. You would go through your season, and then you would have a much smaller tournament to win the championship. Now, that's not to diminish him in any way, but if Krzyzewski gets the 5 championships in a 64-team field, you know, where, as you just said, Danny, one bad night gets you knocked right out of there, you know, Krzyzewski's legacy is I'm not saying we're going to put him with Wooden, but we're going to put him off. We're going to have to put him awfully close.
Well, I think you also have to consider the eras of which Coach K has survived. I mean, not only are we talking about an expanded tournament field, we're talking about the time and era of the one and dones. We're talking about the time when so many different rule changes have occurred in college basketball. So I think because he survived and his legacy has been what it is for decades, I think you have to put him on that Mount Rushmore, I guess you can say, of college coaches.
Danny, would if you were 20 years younger, would you have gone pro after 1 year?
No, I was not ready to go pro after 1 year. I needed to develop more physically and mentally.
But doesn't everybody?
Yeah, they all do. They all do at some level.
Hard to turn down that money.
You get the clock ticking on your second contract, which is what it's all about in the NBA now, and you go there. And I mean, yes, I mean, Would Karl Anthony Towns and Jahlil Okafor, will they both be better players 2 years from now than they are now? Of course they will, but they'll go pro because the reality is it's the sensible thing to do the way the system is currently set up. You were a player of that caliber. You think you would have stayed?
I think I would have stayed. You know, my father played pro basketball and coached me in college, and he let me know I was not ready when I was a senior in college. So I would have stayed. But I think you're right. I think a lot of it just comes down to guys wanting to get to that second contract. But they got to understand, you want to make it a career. You don't want to go in and get one contract and not make it in that league. And a lot of players do that right now.
All right, Mike and Mike, Danny Manning is here. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guest, as always, on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Number 5 is a great one, and I'm going to do it in the form of a trivia question, okay? You got Michigan State on one side of this bracket. You got Wisconsin on the other side of this bracket. It is possible that 2 teams from the same conference could play each other in the national championship game. Can you name the last time 2 teams from the same conference played for the national championship?
I'm going to yield this one to Danny. I know the answer.
You do know the answer?
I do know the answer, so I'm going to see if he gets
Danny,
it.
do you know the answer?
1988.
Let me just say, if you didn't know the answer, something would be wrong because you played in the game.
Right.
It was 1988. It was then called the Big 8, and it was Kansas and Oklahoma in the national championship game, and Danny Manning knocking off Stacey King and Mookie Blaylock and Harvey Grant and all those guys, heavily underdog. They were a 1 seed. You were 6?
6 seed,
A
yes.
6 seed, and you beat them in a championship game with Larry Brown as the coach for the ages. That's the last time. And in all honesty, if I hadn't seen that stat this morning, I obviously remember that game, but I would have guessed that it had happened since. We have not had 2 teams from the same conference meet for the championship since then.
Wow, you're dating me now.
I bet you remember every detail of that game.
A lot of the details.
Okay.
You know, for us, playing Oklahoma, a team that we played twice earlier that beat us, you go back, you watch tapes. If we make some adjustments, we can have a different outcome. Coach Brown put together a great game plan. We all locked in. We bought in. We sacrificed for one another, and we're very fortunate to come out on the winning end.
I'm trying to remember. I remember Michigan and Illinois playing each other in the Final Four the year in '89. The year Michigan wound up winning it, they beat that good Illinois team. So it's happened in the Final Four. But in the championship game, it was that year in '88. It only happened 2 other times. Now, prior to 1975, only 1 school from each conference made the tournament. So it wasn't possible, pardon me, until 1975. So it has actually happened only a total of 3 times that teams have met in the finals from the same conference. 1976, the year we keep talking about, Indiana beat Michigan in the final. 1985, the legendary game. We just had the 30th anniversary of Villanova pitching the perfect game and beating mighty Georgetown. And then your Kansas team in 1988 is the other. So those are the 5 top things you need to know about the Final Four going into this weekend in Indianapolis. Is it possible that we could see a matchup of Jahlil Okafor on one side, Karl Anthony Towns on the other, and have the number 1 pick in the draft be in that game and not be either of the 2 of them? That thought is being raised in a bunch of different places, and I want to get Danny Manning's thought on it in exactly 1 minute on Mike and Mike after this word from YP.com. So all you know is the phones aren't ringing, right? You're not getting enough new customers to grow your business, and that is obviously a major problem. Where do you start? Who can you turn to for sound advice on implementing a marketing program that works? You need YP. YP, the largest marketing agency for small business in America. Started out as the Yellow Pages over 100 years ago. YP powers local businesses with marketing services ranging from web design to search engine marketing. You're the expert in your business, but you don't have to be the expert in online marketing. YP can do that for you. YP is giving you a free online business listing, an essential first step to having customers find you. 80 million potential customers visit YP.com and the YP app every month, and if you're not there, they can't find you. Discover the power that is YP. Claim your free listing and have customers find your business today. Visit myfreeyp.com. Myfreeyp.com. Once more, that's myfreeyp.com. All our dance songs as we head into the Final Four, the last dance of this NCAA tournament. And again, up on ESPNradio.com, you can see all our brackets in the Werner Bracket Challenge. Golic beat me again.
Jeez.
It's just ridiculous.
Greeny.
How was your Final Four? We talked about this the other day, I forgot. I know you didn't have Michigan State.
I didn't have Michigan State.
I forget who you did. You have Virginia from that bracket?
No, I actually had Northern Iowa. I just went completely off the board.
Oh, yes.
I tried to get cute with it, which is always a mistake.
You have Kentucky?
I have Kentucky.
Wisconsin?
I have Duke winning it all.
If Duke wins
I
it
had Duke winning it all. I had Kentucky, Arizona, so obviously Arizona not around. But yeah, I got Duke winning.
Yeah, I had Arizona in that side of it as well. I had Kentucky beating Gonzaga in the final, so that seems unlikely at this point. The one team, Danny, again, for those who don't know Danny Manning, now the coach at Wake Forest, the one team in this tournament that you've played, and left in the tournament that you played, is Duke. How much better have they gotten? I'm looking at some analytics that suggest their defense in particular has been much better in this tournament than it was through the year.
They've gotten a lot better. I think their rotation has shrunk down a little bit. Coach K has done a great job with those guys. He's playing a little bit more zone than he's played in the past in his history. And he's got some really good players. Those three freshmen are really talented, and they go out and they make things happen. You know, Okafor is the guy who gets all the attention. Winslow is playing outstanding basketball. But to me, their guards, Tyus Jones and Quinn Cook, are the guys that really make it happen for that team because they do a great job of taking care of the basketball and also distributing.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Guys, when you buy your clothes at DXL, you look good. But you feel like a rock star. So if you want to look and feel like you'll find all the brands you love, waist size 38 and up, all in one awesome store. DXL, you're looking good. Right now, select dress shirts are just $49.50 each when you buy 2 or more.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Now, let me just very quickly, because people are flying in here on the Eddie Murphy discussions. That's the thing, Danny. What you'll learn is that you can do 3 hours and 55 minutes of great sports talk, analyze these games and these teams, and break down the matchups. And then I say Coming to America is not a top 3 Eddie Murphy movie, and that's all anyone will react to or remember. I think you have to include the concert films. Today's Eddie Murphy's birthday, by the way, for the record.
Well, if we did, I wouldn't quibble with you not having Coming to America in your top 3. You said you were getting a lot of reaction for not putting in Coming to America. They're blowing up my Twitter feed because you said you haven't seen Life.
I haven't seen Life.
Which is unbelievable.
I don't know why I haven't seen it.
That's a really good – him, Martin Lawrence, my man Guy Torrey, who also tweeted that he can't believe that you have not seen Life.
I need to see it.
You need to see this movie.
I don't know why I haven't seen it, but I haven't.
It's tough because Eddie Murphy, to come up with a top 5 Eddie Murphy list, he's made so many great movies, especially if you, as you say, include the concert films, one of the greatest entertainers of our time.
Yeah, I think pure talent, taking everything else out of the equation, he might be at the top of the list. And I would say you have to include the concert films because no one else could do it. I don't know who's considered the best actor in the world today. Who just won Best Actor this year? Whoever it is.
Yeah.
Benedict Cumberbatch or whomever it is. Yeah. You put him on a stage for an hour and 15 minutes with a microphone. I'm not entertained. But Delirious and Raw are, if you put them together, maybe the funniest 3 hours of movie that you will ever see in your entire life. Danny Manning, weigh in on this, if you would.
I'm a big Eddie Murphy fan. I agree with you. I think he's done so much. His body of work is so expansive. It's hard to pick out.
Would Coming to America be in your top?
Coming to America would be in my top, though.
Yeah.
Would be in your top 3?
Be in my top 3. Absolutely.
You're in the minority.
But here's the thing. as we always say with on the tournament with the snubs, in order you got to take something out.
That's true.
So what do we take? Are you taking out Trading Places?
I'm not. That's why my
Are you
my
taking
top,
out Beverly Hills Cop?
Yes, actually I am. I would, because the watchability I think is an important component in this. Every time Coming to America is on, I stop and watch, much like Shawshank Redemption. To me, that's why it might be my favorite movie of all time. Because every time it's on, you stop and you watch, and you have to watch it not just for a few minutes, but all the way through. I don't do that with Beverly Hills Cop. Plus, it's the ultimate, how I do my top 3. I do or top 5. I do the desert island question. If I'm stranded on a desert island, what 5 Eddie Murphy movies am I bringing with me? Coming to America is definitely one.
That's a convincing argument. It's very difficult for me. Eddie Redmayne actually won Best Actor this year. Michael Keaton, our producer Ray says, should have won Best Actor this year. Danny Manning, certainly one of the greatest players of all time, won a championship. And let's go through some of the Twitter reaction from the 100flowers.com Twitter feed. And here's someone. Now, bear in mind that the word Sparty is in his handle. Tweets, since when is the NCAA tournament designed to crown the best team? No one-and-done tournament is designed to crown the best team. I don't think that Sparty and I are disagreeing. Right. I think we agree.
Yeah.
The sports fan in me, somewhere inside of me, doesn't like the fact that the best team gets no advantage, no perceptible advantage in the NCAA tournament. In theory, they're supposed to play closer to home.
Closer to home in a softer region, if you want to sort of take that.
But one upset busts that anyway.
Yeah.
So, Danny, I mean, there's really almost no, there's not, in my view anyway, enough benefit. Let's take Kansas, your alma mater, right? And they're a 2 seed and all that kind of stuff. They had a great season. They get knocked out in the second round, and people will talk about their season as just a disappointment, a failure. It was lousy. It was awful. Bill Self can't coach. If he hadn't won that championship, they'd be wanting to run him out of town already. What they win this season, 27 games? I mean, that's the reality of college basketball.
It is. Not only 27 games. I think it was their 11th conference title in a row. So, that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Whenever you can win 11 titles in a row, especially in a conference like the Big 12. But you're right. I mean, Kansas faces Wichita State in the second round. That is a tough second-round matchup. But there are a lot of those matchups this year. I think it's just a lot of parity in college basketball right now.
We're Mike and Mike. Danny Manning is here. All the Twitter reaction through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Send Easter smiles. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN for special offers starting at $29.99. Now, that obviously are all of these peripheral stories that surround the Final Four as well. I want to get, Danny, your take on two of them. There's so much talk about the one and done, and we understand that's not a college rule. That's an NBA rule. The NBA wants to change. The commissioner has talked many times on our show and other places about wanting to adapt that rule to go from a 19-year age limit to a 20-year age limit. I've heard a lot of people say they think the baseball system is best. If you're a high school kid and you're good enough to go to the NBA right now, God bless you, go. And then if you're going to go to college, then commit for, they do it in baseball, a minimum of 3 years. Maybe in basketball we could do it a minimum of 2 years. What are your thoughts on ways that the game, if you believe that it could be made better with relative to the one-and-done situation, what would be your thoughts?
I like the way that you're thinking. I do believe if you're a high school kid and you have a chance to go and you're good enough to go, you should go. But if you go to college, you should be there for a couple years. I think that gives you a chance to really lock in and enjoy college. A lot of times now these kids come out as one-and-dones. They go to school that first semester, and technically they really don't have to go the second semester. I'm not saying that happens, but
we know it happens sometimes.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. So, I think going and being there for 2 years also helps the colleges out, helps out coaches in recruiting and trying to get your classes together and put your team together as well.
Yeah, I like the baseball rule as well. That would seem to be a more satisfying solution, especially when you look at how the NFL does it too. It's somewhat similar in the sense that you have to stay in school a certain amount of time. Although, I mean, not to completely throw this conversation off track, nowadays, especially with the way the game is played and certainly some of the trouble some of these universities have been in regarding academics, it has made me wonder, is college truly the best place for a high school basketball player in terms of development? I mean, and Danny, maybe you can shed some light on this. I mean, when you look at the academic scandal at UNC and that's taking place at other universities, are they really invested in educating some of these kids? Because it's one thing to have them there. It's a whole other thing to educate them.
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that you have to be very aware of once you go into the situation. But I don't think college is for everybody. I'll be honest with you. I think there are a lot of kids out there that are good enough to play professional basketball that should be able to go to a minor league situation. I think that's something that also needs to be looked at as well.
Well, Mark Cuban has talked a lot about that, about trying to invest more in the NBA Developmental League, the D-League as they call it, to try and make it a real option. And in addition to having basketball, have other services there available to players. So the guys who don't wind up making it to the NBA will not have lost out completely on their opportunity to get an education, whether it's some kind of educational process or other that they could provide through the D-League to give them a legitimate option to college for kids, as you say, for whom college really is not a realistic or is not their best opportunity.
That's a great idea. I think it's something that we should explore and look into.
Yeah, and I think the Big Ten, they're also exploring the idea. I can't say I love this idea of sort of not allowing freshmen to be eligible to compete. I think that used to be a rule like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Just to get them more prepared, more ready, more adaptable to college.
The legendary story is that they used to have freshman teams, and then when Lou Alcindor was on the freshman team at UCLA, they would beat the varsity. He was so good, but he wasn't eligible to play his first year. You look back, why didn't Alcindor play 4 years at UCLA? Because freshmen weren't eligible to play in those days. They also didn't let guys go to college unless they were in a circumstance called hardships. There's a word we haven't heard in a long time. That went out with the old 3 to make 2. I mean, they've changed a lot of things in basketball, and some of them for the better and some of them for the worse. But to me, the biggest problem I have with it is that it's not what it should be, which is all slanted towards whatever is in the best interest of the young people involved. At the end of the day, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar enterprise in the NBA and a multi-billion-dollar enterprise in college basketball, college sports in general. There's no one person who is going to, no matter, I don't care if it's LeBron James, is going to tilt that enough that you shouldn't be bending over backwards to make the situation the best it can be for each young individual. For example, Seth Davis tweeted this the other day. Why on earth, if a kid declares himself eligible for the draft and he doesn't get drafted, can he not go back to college? Why in the world can he not do that? It makes no sense. It certainly isn't in his best interest. You're not helping him out, so who are you helping out? Who's it going to hurt so badly? If the school that had him doesn't want him anymore, okay. If someone else wants him, let them recruit him. Who's being hurt by that? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. Common sense stuff that you could change tomorrow if you wanted to.
Kinda. Well, as a coach, when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, coach, I'm going to the next level. I want to put my name in the hat," you got to go recruit. And it's kind of hard to recruit to a hypothetical. Well, I got a scholarship for you, but if this guy comes back, I'm not going to give it to you, and that opens up.
Well, but it doesn't have to. That's my point. You don't have to take him back, but let him have eligibility.
Okay.
All right. So now you're Danny Manning. Obviously, this would not have applied to you. You were the number one pick in the draft. But now you're Danny Manning, and you decide, you know what? I want to see if what'll happen. You don't get drafted. All right. Kansas doesn't want you anymore, but some other school might. If you put your name eligible for the draft as of right now, you lose your eligibility, and that's it, no matter what happens. And that's who's that helping?
No, I don't think it helps anybody, and certainly not the young people involved. I struggle with this because I see the benefit, and part of this is because I'm basing this so much on my own college experience. I mean, we all had really good college experiences. We learned, we developed. Maybe we met some of our best friends. It prepared us for life in a lot of different ways. But as he said, a lot of people don't have that experience, or it's just simply not for them. I hate the idea of taking away options from young people, because when I came out of high school, I had all the options. Whatever option I wanted to explore, I could. Whether it be a good one, a bad one, a dumb one, didn't matter. And so I feel like we keep limiting their choices. And as much as I would love the baseball rule, selfishly, because I want to see college basketball back kind of the way it used to, it's probably not in the best interest for them. And certainly if somebody tried to block me from making as much money as I could at a young age, I'd probably be pretty upset about it. So I'm trying to be fair throughout this process, and I think ultimately somebody's going to get left out.
All right, Mike Brey, I'm told, is ready to go. So let me give you 1 minute here from Scott's, and then we'll bring in the coach of Notre Dame. What a game that was. That was an absolute game for the ages on Saturday night with Brey's Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I wish Golic was here because he was, literally practically couldn't breathe when that thing was over. We'll talk to Mike Brey in 1 minute after this word from Scott's. It is officially spring. That means opening day is right around the corner, and potentially so is crabgrass. While spring and Major League Baseball are the perfect match, no one wants to deal with crabgrass. That unwelcome stuff can put a damper on the season. Now, in case you're thinking, but crabgrass is a relentless evil that's unstoppable and I've just come to accept it, think again. There's a way to save the season and stop that pesky stuff before it begins. An early spring feeding with Scott's Turf Builder Halt's Crabgrass Preventer with lawn food is your best defense. That's right. The evil you once thought was unavoidable is now avoidable. By applying this amazing stuff now, you'll have weatherproof protection and prevent crabgrass all season long. Not to mention, you'll be giving your lawn the essential nutrients it needs to make spring a great season. Learn more at Scotts.com. Feed your lawn. Feed it with Scotts, the official lawn care company of Major League Baseball.
Final Four Friday with Mike and Mike.
5 to shoot. Moves to his right to the elbow. Jumps the pass out to Connaughton. 2 to shoot. Out to Grant for the long three. Goal! Jaron Grant from 30 feet away. And Notre Dame leads 66-64 with 2:25 to go.
The courtesy of the Westwood One NCAA Radio Network. Notre Dame involved in not one but a couple of classics in this NCAA tournament, including that overtime win over Butler and then the heartbreaking loss on Saturday night to Kentucky in what was a great game. And with Mike and Mike, Jemele Hill here, and Danny Manning now the coach of Wake Forest. The guy you know awful well is Mike Brey, the coach of Notre Dame on the Subway Feshtek Hotline. Good morning, Coach. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Great to be with all of you. How you doing?
We are very well, thank you. And I was just talking to Danny Manning for a couple of minutes during the break about your team and all that, and he was singing the praises in particular of Jaron Grant. What a terrific season that kid had, a terrific run in the NCAA tournament.
No, he really did. And hello there, Danny. Great to have my counterpart there from the ACC. And, the thing is, Mike, Wake Forest is quietly getting really good fast. Don't let him downplay anything. They're getting really good quick. And But great to be with you guys. Now, Jaron, Mike, Jaron's like, what a great story. Is there a better story in college basketball? Him coming back and having a year after being suspended and kind of driving us to it. And it was great to have two seniors, Connaughton and Grant. We were a little bit of a throwback with two seniors that kind of set the tone and really led and got the younger guys more confident.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. Watching your teams and playing up against them, really going into that game, we really try to figure out how can we slow down Grant? What can we do to keep him in front of us? And that's almost an impossible task. And then you got all those great shooters around him, and he's so unselfish. He makes everybody on that court so much better. And you guys had a great run, and congratulations for that.
Oh, thank you, Danny. You're right. The neat thing about him is, I think this year he did a good job of balancing, when to score it and not being too unselfish. I think earlier in his career, he turned things down. He loves being a playmaker, but, he's so good off the ball screen, which is going to make him some money here in a little bit. The next level people love him because he really is good off that ball screen stuff. But he was a guy involved with everything on the offensive end. If he wasn't scoring it, he was making that pass that led to the score. So he had a great frame of mind. He became more of a leader. And, I'm thrilled that he comes back and he's making the All-American teams. It was really a fun run with seniors setting the tone.
And the run going all the way through an Elite Eight matchup, one for the ages against Kentucky on Saturday night. Mike and Mike Brey, the coach of Notre Dame. So let's start there. And can you take us through, you wouldn't do it before the game, obviously, but now afterwards, can you take us through the game plan? Because obviously the way your offense functioned, yours is a team that is known for, knocking down threes, and they weren't falling for you that night, but going to the basket in particular against that huge Kentucky team. Take us through the game plan.
Well, there's no question, Mike, that, we can shoot the ball. But even in the ACC tournament, we won a couple games, driving the ball a little more. And I thought that really helped us down there. We got off to good starts driving the ball. I thought Kentucky did a great job taking away the arc. I think it was one of their, main points to chase us off the arc. And with their length, they were able to do that pretty easily. So cutting and moving and driving, we thought was a key, and we were able to keep the floor open. We really didn't throw it into the low post to Zach August much. He was out on the perimeter a lot, so the floor was open, and then he would ball screen and roll. But, we do know how to move without it. It's a group that's played together a bunch, and we were able to get some stuff at the basket, which at least gave you something because, again, I thought at least until maybe the last 10 minutes, they were so conscious of chasing us off the three-point line, and they did a heck of a job of it.
Coach, I don't know how often, I'm just going to assume you have done it often, that you replayed those final seconds of the game in your mind. Yeah. It created a lot of debate about whether or not you should have intentionally fouled. What was your thought process in those seconds in terms of deciding not to intentionally foul?
Well, I mean, we was tied at the time. I think, Jemele, I think the thing, I don't think we really went through fouling or not fouling. It was a little more of, would you go for a 2-for-1 with a little over a minute to go in the ball? We've really not done that. I know the NBA does it a lot. The one thing that I kick myself about is in the last possession when Harrison got fouled and Jackson tried to take a charge, it was tied. A lot of times before the half, as a team is grinding it down to the last shot, we'd switch to zone with about 10 seconds to go and give them a different look. And I really, in hindsight, I thought we should have gave them a different look. They were getting to the basket. They were posting us just to give them a different look. I thought was a key. We got it into our guy. He had to catch it flat on the baseline with the tie score with 6 seconds. And, we love Jaron to go ahead and create. But, there's Cauley Stein is a freak of nature defender. But in that play, if you watch what he did against the guard for 94 feet, chasing him into the corner where he didn't get a clean look, it kind of blew my mind just how he was able to keep up with a guard. And he did that most of the night. He really did.
Mike and Mike Brey. The other one that we wondered about here, and I had a conversation with Seth Greenberg about it on Monday, and he was explaining what he thought your thinking was, but you're you, so you can actually tell us what your thinking was, is Karl Anthony Towns, because of his enormous advantage in size, getting the ball down low and was able to score. It felt somewhat at will in that second half, and you were very hesitant to double him. What was the thinking on not sending a second defender often against him in that second half?
We were so concerned about what we did since Greensboro was really let people make threes. We felt we would score enough with our offensive efficiency to escape and not give up threes because they're just so hard to absorb. And then they're big momentum plays, too. Obviously, they count another point, but they're great momentum plays. The two times that we changed to try and help on Towns, we went zone one possession, Booker hit a three. And then the other time, I told Demetrius Jackson to help off of Ulis and go ahead and just attack Towns, and then he hit a three. And then after that, it was about 6 minutes to go, I said to myself, we're going to have to ride this out, and we're going to do the best we can. And, Zach, you got him one-on-one. Do the best you can.
That was basically
so that was my thinking on that.
That was basically what Seth Greenberg said. I said, it wasn't working. He said it was working. They were right there at the end of the game with a chance to win. It also limited foul trouble and the rest of that. So quickly, Coach, a bunch of teams took Kentucky right to the wire this year. Yours among them. If Bo Ryan were to call you up and say, hey, give me one or two things I really need to be planning this week to be ready to take them out on Saturday, what would they be?
Well, I think they match up great, Mike, in that they can spread people out like us. They can spread it out and make their big guys get out on the floor more and not hang around the lane and protect the basket quite as much. They're still going to block shots. They don't turn the ball over. We don't really turn it over much. They don't put people on the foul line. We play similarly. They can control tempo and grind when they need to. But I think just from an offense, they'll be able to rebound. We were able to rebound. Even as a small group, we weren't crushed on the board. It was basically even on the backboard. But I think their skill level and their ability to open up the floor, which we were able to do, is very much a key to get those bigger bodies out on the floor a little more so you may get a few things at the bucket.
Well, Mike, I know that if Golic was here, he'd be congratulating you as well on what was a tremendous run. It was a lot of fun to watch. Your team played an unbelievable game, particularly on Saturday night. So congratulations on a great year. Enjoy the Final Four this weekend, and thanks always for the time.
Always good to be with you guys. Take care, Mike. Hello. See you.
That's Mike Brey with us, the coach of Notre Dame on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. That's the kind of law that Mike and I always go back and forth about this. Danny, I throw this to you quickly. As a fan, and that's all I've ever been, I'd rather get blown out than lose a game like that. If I lose a game by 35 points, by the second half, I've moved on to something else. Right. But I lose a game like that, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it 20 years from now.
Absolutely. It's going to sting. It's going to sting for a very long time. And that's part of the reason that we do it, to be honest with you. I mean, there's still games that roll back in my mind that I played really bad in and we lost, and it still burns me to this day. And that's that competitive nature, and that's just kind of part of going out and being that gladiator in the sport.
Monday, Mike and Mike are live from D.C. for baseball's opening day. Don't miss Hall of Fame pitcher John Smoltz at 8:10 Eastern. The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
We are Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Jemele Hill is here, and it is our pleasure to welcome the head basketball coach at Villanova. Jay Wright is with us. Jay, say hello to Danny Manning, who's hosting with us today.
Good morning, guys. How are you, Danny? We're holding the fort down for you here.
Jay, how you doing, man? Congratulations on a great year.
Thank you, buddy. And it's good to talk to you. You look good on there, man. I'm watching you guys. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Coach. And I want to start with that because Danny just said it exactly right. Congratulations on a great year. You had a great year. You lost 2 games all season long. And I bemoan this fact regularly on this program, that the NCAA tournament is a blessing and a curse. It's the most exciting thing of the entire year in sports. And yet there are people out there who are going to say, well, Villanova had a disappointing year. What a bad year it was, because you have 2 losses all year long and you get knocked out in the second round. How do you view your team's season this year?
Well, I think you hit it on the head, Mike. I mean, that's just the way college basketball is now. I mean, we had a great year. We won the regular season in the Big East, and we and we won the tournament, the Big East tournament, and then, you know, we got a number 2 seed overall. So up until that point, everything was great, and we took on all of our challenges, and we were successful. And then the final part of your season in college basketball, unfortunately, is the one that everybody remembers, but it is the final part of your season. You do prepare for that. And in the NCAA tournament, we failed. You know, we ran up against an NC State team that played a great game against LSU, and I think was coming in with great confidence. And, you know, we had a shot right at the end. We had a wide open 3 down 2. We didn't hit it, and we go home. And one of the things we want our guys to learn from that is, you know, we took all the accolades all year when everybody said how good we were, and then you got to accept people's opinions when you lose, too. That's all part of it. That's part of being a big-time athlete.
Coach, there's been a lot of conversation about the state of the men's game. I'm not sure if you saw what Gino Auriemma had to say, calling it a, quote, joke. What's your take about how offense and how the game is played today?
Jemele, I listen to you guys all the time, and I do think that Kentucky team should be one of the best, and you always. I just want you to listen to girl. But you know, I think, I listen to you guys, and I think the game's in a great place right now. I really do. I mean, the popularity of college basketball is outstanding. I think that the Notre Dame Kentucky game had the highest rating ever of any game on cable. So I mean, and you look at the crowds, I think there's great parity in college basketball. There's a lot of great players. You got a team like Kentucky right now. This isn't going to happen again for a long time. Got a chance to go undefeated. Now, can we tweak some things? Yeah, like I'm in favor of the 24-second shot clock, and I think we've got to gradually move to that. But when you talk about the physicality and the change in the officiating, yes, we got to tweak it a little bit, but I think it's one of the things that makes college basketball great. And if you talk to people who watch pro basketball and college basketball, they always talk about, I love the intensity of the college games. You know, the physicalness. You know, you guys were just talking earlier about the physicality of the NBA game, you know, is changing. You can't be as physical. So I just think there's a uniqueness to the college game that makes it a great game. And we're meeting right now in Indianapolis. We have a meeting at 9 o'clock, the coaches meeting, and we'll talk about these things and changing things. So I think the state of college basketball is in a great spot.
Look, Coach, I don't think I was going to let you slide with that comment about me judging Kentucky harshly. Look, think of all the great all-time teams in college basketball. How soon if you rank them all, how soon until you get to this Kentucky team? Just think about that.
Well, here's the thing. Here's my thought on this, Jemele. I get your point, and I'm from the same era. I know the teams you're talking about. Even if you go back to the Alcindor teams of UCLA and the Larry Johnson UNLV teams and Christian Laettner, all those great teams. What this is what we all want in sports. These are superstars that are sacrificing for the good of the team, for the good of their university to win. And all of these young guys like Towns and Booker and Cauley-Stein, because of the way college basketball is now, these guys are going to be stars in the NBA later, but you're just catching them at a young age, whereas back in the day when Laettner or Walton or Alcindor or Johnson were playing, they were already complete players because they were juniors and seniors. And these guys are also doing this, playing more games and against more parity. There's way more talented players on other teams that these guys are playing against than those other guys played against.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Coach. I think if you go back and you look at some of those teams and you look at basketball today, the parity is unreal with the amount of talent on each individual team that's out there.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, and those other teams are great. I mean, I just say they belong with those. If they win this, even if they don't win this, they belong with those teams because the era is different. But given what they have accomplished in their challenges compared to what those other teams had to challenge them, this might be one of the greatest ever.
Yeah, we're going to argue that coming up in a couple of minutes, Jemele. Mike and Mike, Jemele Hill, Danny Manning are here. But, Jay, before we let you go, let's look at these matchups. Kentucky obviously has been pushed to the limit several times this season, most recently by Notre Dame just the other night. You look at Wisconsin and the size that they have. Those guys can all go outside and shoot it. We saw Decker do it. We've seen Kaminsky do it. How do you like the matchup of Wisconsin against Kentucky?
You know what, Mike? I was listening to Mike Brey, and I think he really had a great point that I think Wisconsin can do what Notre Dame did with a little bit more size. They can stretch you, and you guys were talking about how they played behind the post. Wisconsin can do that a little bit, take away the threes, play behind the post, but with better size. And they might have more effect on Towns, and they might have more effect on Cauley-Stein. So I think they have the best shot of beating them. With that said, the one thing about those Kentucky kids that's amazing, and I talked to John about this, we just texted about it yesterday, they have so much pressure on them, and they have handled it extremely well, better than I even thought they could. They have an incredible will to win. So that's going to be a great game, but I think Wisconsin has the best chance of beating them.
You know, this is really interesting to me because our research department sent out numbers on clutch time. Wisconsin's clutch time numbers are actually slightly better than Kentucky's clutch time numbers, but they're so close that they're barely perceptible from each other. But here's the one thing that I do think is somewhat interesting. The final 5 minutes of Kentucky's win against Notre Dame in the Elite Eight are the Wildcats' only clutch time minutes, meaning the only close final minutes they've played in either the SEC tournament or the NCAA tournament. So I guess I would ask you, Jay, how significant is that? Wisconsin has played some closer games. Other teams have had a lot of close finishes, while Kentucky has been practically perfect in clutch time all year long. They've played very little of it. Is that significant?
That is significant in the NCAA tournament. You know, our first round game, we played Lafayette. We won by 40, and then now we're in a nail-biter against NC State the next game. Back-to-back, I think it has the biggest impact. The fact that Kentucky's last game was that way, I think evens out the fact that Wisconsin's had a lot of those games. Your last game has a great impact on you.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, Kentucky did have one great last game against Notre Dame, and we'll see where it goes. Jay, you're off to your meeting. Thanks a million. Always appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend.
Good talking to you guys. Take care.
The best of Mike and Mike.
The Final Four. It's Eddie Murphy's birthday, and that has taken over the show. Happy 53rd birthday to arguably the funniest and most talented person in show business in our era, and that is Eddie Murphy. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Subway Fresh Take Hotline for Mark Few and Greg Marshall in this hour, and a great morning we're having here. Jemele Hill is in with me this morning from His and Hers, and the great Danny Manning, who in 1988 led Kansas on one of the great rides through the NCAA tournament of all time. Let me ask you this. Is there a day that goes by in your life that someone does not walk up to you and either ask you a question or maybe even more to the point, just thank you for that run that your team had that year, and you in particular?
There are a few days that doesn't happen. You know, when I was back working for Bill Self at Kansas as an assistant, it was brought up a little bit more than it is right now at Wake Forest. But, you know, for me, it's a great memory that always brings a smile to my face no matter what's going on. I feel very fortunate and blessed to be able to have that experience.
Yeah, Danny, the head coach at Wake Forest now, and again, one of the great runs, scored 37% of his team's points in the tournament that year, and you know, Danny and the Miracles, it's still one of the great runs of all time. Now, some of the reaction we're getting on Twitter to the variety of different things we're talking about. One of them, the argument over whether Kentucky, this group, should they be considered with the greatest of all time. I made the argument about accomplishments. Byron tweets, the 76 Indiana team is not considered the best team ever, yet they are the last to go undefeated. Well, they're the last, but they're not the only. For the record, when ESPN put together like its field of the top greatest teams of all time, they're fourth. The UCLA 1968 team that finished 29-1, that was actually one of the Alcindor teams. John Wooden called it his best team ever. They lost that one game to Elvin Hayes in Houston, then wound up killing them in the Final Four that year. That's considered number one. The 72 UCLA team led by Bill Walton is considered number two. North Carolina's team that won the title with Worthy, Perkins, and Jordan making the shot at the end is 3. And then Indiana in 76 is 4. So they're not that far off being at the very top. I'm not saying if Kentucky wins, they're number 1. But I'm saying you have to give them their due with the greatest teams of all time.
It's just tough because, as I said, where do you rank them? You know, if you think about the top 10 or 15 greatest teams of all time, I'm just not sure where to put them on that list because I do think there were some other teams that were better. Now, if you want to stick to, say, the one-and-done era, if we want to characterize it that way, yeah, they would be definitely one of the best teams of the one-and-done era.
How much difference does – I know that I'm asking a ridiculous question, but you could try and put some sort of quantification on it, Danny, if you could. How much difference do those years make? Like, for example, Christian Laettner went to the Final Four 4 straight years. How much better was he, if you could quantify it, his senior year than he was his freshman year.
He was much better. He had a better understanding of the game, a little bit stronger, and knew how to make his teammates better. Laettner went through a great run. 4 years making it to the Final Four, that's a great accomplishment. But each year he evolved as a player, and he made his teammates better.
JT tweets me, the current Kentucky team has not accomplished more than the 2012 Kentucky team. The Anthony Davis team was much better. Well, first of all, you're correct. They haven't won it yet. Mm-hmm. If they lose, this whole conversation becomes moot. But if they win, why are you telling me the Anthony Davis team was better? Because Anthony Davis was on it? Because they had the first 2 picks in the draft? I get it. Is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist going to be a great NBA player? I don't know. Anthony Davis obviously is. I think he has a chance to be an all-time NBA player. But as we just ran through it, Danny Manning, you're telling me you think this Kentucky team has 6 pros on it.
I do. I think this is a very talented team, and they're going to have very lengthy professional careers in the NBA.
Now, these are for you, Jemele, because Eddie Murphy. Veritas of Verizon tweets, The Distinguished Gentleman is the best Eddie Murphy movie.
I don't know who Veritas of Verizon is, but they need to have a stadium full of seats. Because anybody who says that is the best Eddie Murphy movie clearly has not watched enough Eddie Murphy.
I never saw The Distinguished Gentleman.
It was okay. I mean, no one would rank that among his best.
Except for this person here. Mike, Nutty Professor, getting some for that. And then Alonzo, and we are getting a lot of these, wants to know the origin of the Freddy's Barbecue Joint T-shirt.
For all the House of Cards fans know this shirt, because one of the places that Frank Underwood, the fictional president played by Kevin Spacey, that he went to was a place called Freddy's Barbecue. So this place, as far as I know, does not really exist.
Do you watch House of Cards?
I do not.
Danny, you do not. Do you watch any of those, like the season kind of shows now, or anything? What TV shows do you watch? What when you're not watching sports?
I like Empire.
Empire. We're here with that one. Love Empire.
Yes.
Yeah, we're me and my co-host Michael Smith. We're running a campaign to get on Empire, because that's the hottest new show out. I just want Cookie's fur. That's all I know.
Let's make that happen.
Yeah.
Didn't Michelle Beadle get herself into Sharknado?
She got on Sharknado. Somebody put me on Empire.
No, let's make that happen. Let's get his and hers on Empire if we can. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. Getting back to the whole going pro if you're a college coach. We brought that up with Pitino yesterday. We had Rick Pitino on in the Hall of Fame. Rick Pitino's tenure as head coach of the Knicks is largely under or misremembered. He was a much better coach with the Knicks than people ever give him credit for. Left after just 2 years in a personality conflict with the general manager, Al Bianchi. Went to Kentucky. If he'd stayed there, they probably would have won 5 titles by now, if not more. Went back to the pros, got lured for the money, among other things, with Boston. That didn't work out. Comes back to Louisville, and, they're in the Final Four often, and he's won a title there. And he's also Billy Donovan's mentor. Donovan played for him at Providence, and they're very close. He's like a son. So with that in mind, here were Pitino's thoughts. He brought up Donovan by himself without me mentioning Billy Donovan when we talked about this yesterday.
I don't recommend it for college coaches to do that unless they know what it's all about. Now, I take someone like Billy Donovan. I think Billy has looked at it. I think he has an urge to coach in the NBA, a strong desire to coach in the NBA. He would like to try it, very similar to Brad Stevens, who's doing a wonderful job with the Celtics. So I think people like that, with that type of personality, will do very well. I don't think Tom Izzo should even think about it. I've told him that many, many times, because he is what college basketball is all about. He's a staple at Michigan State, and he's of the age, like, if Billy doesn't do well, he can go back to college. Brad Stevens can go back to college. When you get to the our age, Tom and my age, where are you going to go back to? The McBurney's YMCA on 27th Street or 34th Street? So if you're happy where you're at, it's probably a good place to stay.
Maybe that is the one thing. A guy like Brad Stevens isn't even 40 yet. Billy Donovan, I believe, is 49. So, yes, he's young enough that he could go to the pros, give that a try, and then go back. But there's something to be said for the guys who are, there forever. And Mike Krzyzewski is good. As long as they talk about basketball, they're going to talk about Mike Krzyzewski. As long as they talk about basketball, they talk about John Wooden. They're going to talk about Tom Izzo. And these guys who stay in one place forever. And maybe that doesn't mean something to everyone. I think if I were in that position, it would mean something to me.
Well, I think for those situations also different. At Michigan State, certainly there was a basketball tradition there, but he has helped to take it to another level, the highest level it's ever been, higher than even when Magic Johnson was there. And so that was something he always talked about, wanting to leave his footprints in the sand, a message he sends to his team all the time. I think for Billy Donovan, it's different. And maybe some of it is because Florida, when you think about them, even though he had those great teams with Joakim Noah and Al Horford, you think about football first. And so maybe that's part of this conversation as well. It's interesting, though, that you brought up, when you interviewed Rick Pitino, you didn't even bring up Billy Donovan.
I did not.
And if you look at the story and reports that are out about it today, they're just suggesting that it's widely known that he wants to try it. So there it is, confirming those reports, because I imagine they still talk, and that's why he felt that he could say that.
Yeah, he began the sound. Right prior to making those comments, Pitino was talking about how those of us who've been through it, he started out, he was an assistant under Hubie Brown with the Knicks, so he kind of knew what the NBA was all about. Just how different. Danny, you played at the highest level of college. You played the NBA for years. You're now a head coach on the college level. Just how different are the NBA and college?
Well, it's a lot different. I think the biggest thing you have to understand at that professional level is you're managing egos to a certain extent, and you're trying to make it all mesh and fit together. And there's a lot of dynamics that go into it, and understanding that going into it, and it's a players' league. Those guys, the players run the league, and we got back to talking about control, and there's a little bit more control we feel in college basketball than in pro basketball.
And now I know you're happy where you are, but long time from now, is coaching in the NBA something you would be interested in?
Yeah, I'd say so. Down the road, when you don't have the energy to go out and recruit and do the things that you have to do at the college level, because it's all ball. And what's the discipline at that pro level? I'm just going to take so much money from you until you straighten up and act right. And it's not quite like that at the college level.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like having, it's like dealing with your kids. At the end of the day, they have to do what you tell them to. And that's the way it is in the college level. These college players, for however long they're there, they have to do what the coach tells them to do. In the NBA, they obviously don't. Another thing, Danny, this just jumped into my mind as you were talking, because recruiting, obviously, is the lifeblood of a college basketball program. Again, Danny now at Wake Forest. So you walk into the room of a hotshot high school player, real good young player that you're trying to recruit. Because this came up with Chris Mullen the other day. Golic mentioned it. The kid doesn't remember Chris Mullen as a player, but the parents do. So when you walk into a kid's house, do the kids know who Danny Manning is? Do the parents know who Danny Manning is? Does that make any difference? How significant is the fact that you were a great player when you walk into a kid's house to recruit him?
I think it helps you with the coaches. I think the coaches can relate to that a little bit more. Now the players, the smart era is going on. They get their smartphone, they get their iPad, they can find out whatever they want to find out, but they have to get prompted probably by their parents or their coaches to go back and see, well, how good was Chris Mullen? That team he played on at St. John's that went on that great run. What did he do? What did he accomplish? So I think those guys go back and they look at their devices and they kind of figure it out. But for the coaches and the parents, it does give you a little crack in the door, so to speak.
Well, let me ask you this, Greeny, though. Is there something – I know Golic's brought it up. I certainly kind of side with him on this. Can you blame the college coaches for feeling like, I want to know what it's like to coach somebody like LeBron James, for example? Because, I think about us even in our respective jobs. While ESPN was never the destination I had in mind, I understand why the young journalists and aspiring journalists I meet today, why ESPN is that mountaintop for them. Certainly they can go to different markets and dominate that market, but there is something to be said for knowing what it feels like to be among truly the elite. Do you know what I mean?
Of course I do. But that's why I debate with Golic all the time the notion that is elite. Ask David Blatt how much fun it is to coach LeBron James. Ask him how much fun he's having doing that right now. I don't think it looks like fun. I think that there is nothing lesser, and that maybe is the crux of the disagreement you and I are having here. And Golic is on your side, which should not hurt you in any way, by the way. There's nothing lesser about coaching on the college level. To me, Mike Krzyzewski is in no way a lesser coach than Greg Popovich, right? I don't think so. It's from an X's and O's standpoint, the accomplishments are different. They're not the same thing.
But not lesser in that regard. But in terms of who you're coaching, like you're right, David Blatt is that's a very tense situation, right? But there is something to be said. I bet Coach K had a lot of fun coaching the Olympics.
Yeah.
That doesn't,
that's a false situation.
You're not going to get that kind of team, true. But there is something to be said for being able to coach the most elite athletes you can and bringing out the best in them.
Ask George Karl how much fun he had coaching Carmelo Anthony versus Jim Boeheim, right? Jim Boeheim to this day loves Carmelo Anthony. Why? Because he had him 1 year when he was in college, and at the end of the day, Carmelo had to do what he had to do.
And he had the power in that relationship.
Yeah, ask NBA coaches who've coached Carmelo how much fun they've had doing it.
Hey, but look at Steve Kerr. Bet you he's having a lot of fun, right?
But now you're at the mercy of the players that you're coaching being that kind of players. Jeff Van Gundy talked about that with us many, many years ago. I've always remembered it. The relationship between the coach and the best player is the most important relationship in sports. If it's good, if he's an extension of you, you've got a chance. And if it's not, you're dead. And that, I think, holds to this day.
Mike and Mike.
Now let's get to the real forward thinking here. Wisconsin, for the record, the point spreads in both games tomorrow are the same. Kentucky and Duke are both 5-point favorites. We're not picking against the spread, and certainly Danny Manning, I would never ask you to pick against the spread as an active coach right now, head coach of Wake Forest. But let us make the picks. Let's start to take the games in the order in which they'll be played. Duke and Michigan State, who do you expect to win? And give me a quick thumbnail of why.
Oh, I like Duke. I think Duke comes out and they score the ball, in my opinion, a little bit easier from different spots out on the floor. And I really like them out in transition as well. Michigan State is great in transition on the glass, but I have Duke in that game.
And Jemele, again, the Michigan State alum, your thoughts?
Okay, so I probably won't be able to go back to East Lansing for a while. I actually would pick Duke as well. I've been very impressed with how their defense has kind of really come along in the tournament. And I agree with Danny. Sometimes this team does struggle to score, even though Travis Trice has been really incredible and has had a wonderful tournament. I just think Duke is a little bit better, but I expect this to be a much closer game, and not that it was out of hand when they played in the Champions Classic earlier in the season, but I expect this to be a real nail-biter, but I have Duke coming out on top.
And I would add to it, rounding out the trio, we're all going to pick Duke. Izzo, as great a coach as he is, Krzyzewski has owned him. I mean, owned him.
He's only beaten him once?
I think 1-8 is the number, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Krzyzewski does a better team, and he has traditionally won. All right, the second game, Wisconsin. A lot of people from the very beginning of the season have pointed to Wisconsin as one of the teams they could see knocking off Kentucky. They get their shot here. They've been waiting a year for it after a 1-point loss last year. What do you say, Danny Manning? Does Wisconsin end the perfect season?
I do not believe they end the perfect season. I'm going with Kentucky. I think Kentucky just has too many bodies to throw out there. Now, they're going to have to get out there to that three-point line because Wisconsin's bigs and all their players are very good out there, and they can make plays, they can make shots, but I think Kentucky has just a little bit too much firepower.
Jemele.
I'm calling the upset.
Really?
I like Wisconsin. I do think them losing last year is a significant factor in this. It kind of reminds me of how the Spurs approached the season after they lost to the Heat, then came back to win the championship. I think Wisconsin does a lot of things Notre Dame does, but they do it better. And that experienced leadership, the fact they don't turn the ball over and they don't foul, I think they're an incredible team, and they have a guy like Frank Kaminsky who can bring that size out on the perimeter. I like Wisconsin with the upset.
I got to tell you, there's a part of me that thinks so, too. I said it earlier in this week. I think they do what Notre Dame does, but they do it with bigger people, and that might be an advantage. If you made me pick the game, I would pick Kentucky, but I would not be the least bit surprised. I'll make the official pick Kentucky, just because you have to go on record one way or another.
I was scared.
I just, listen, at some point, there's a part of me that wants to say if they were going to lose, they would have lost already. People have had them on the ropes and haven't been able to knock them out. Mike and Mike brought to you by Werner. If you haven't heard, Werner came out with a brand new style of ladder, the Podium. If you're afraid of heights, this one is for you. Once you step on the Podium, you'll see what safety feels like. Check it out at wernerpodium.com. Danny Manning, it has been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Continued success at Wake Forest. We wish you the very best. Jemele, we'll see you on His and Hers at noon. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. And we're going to continue people are going to continue to yell at you on Twitter. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday right back here, Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.
ESPN Radio. Bringing you directly to the biggest events in sports.
Center field, well hit, Hunter back, out of here!
From opening day of baseball.
Throw to the plate, safe at the plate!
Right through the World Series.
For the third time in 5 seasons, the San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
Whether it's LeBron, Chris Paul, or Kevin Durant, when the NBA tips off, ESPN Radio is right there when a champion is crowned.
We have a new world champion. The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
And when the magic of bowl season arrives, ESPN Radio is your home for the new college football playoff.
The college football playoff first national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
The biggest events in sports can be found right here on ESPN Radio.
Isn't this weather great, Golic?
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had a day like this.
Oh, and we're doing it upright. Some Johnsonville brats on the grill, a cold drink in our hands, feet kicked up. This is how to live.
Yeah, can you imagine all those people who have to be inside working on a day like this?
Yeah, those poor people.
Oh, I'm just so glad you found those guys to fill in and take our place on the show today.
Wait, what? I thought you were going to get the guest host for today.
No, Greeny. I said I was going to get some root beer floats.
Well, then who's doing our show right now?
Well, that's not good. We better get back to the studio.
But Golic, the brats are ready.
Oh, man, Johnsonville brats, all that full, juicy flavor that comes from only premium cuts of pork. We could probably enjoy a couple of these before we head back, right?
I don't see why not. That static seems to be doing okay, and it's certainly not going anywhere.
Then neither are we. Pass me one of those Johnsonville brats.
Johnsonville, served with pride since 1945. Find delicious recipes for the grill at johnsonville.com.
Two of baseball's best go head-to-head in interleague action when the Tigers head to St. Louis to face the Cardinals. That one is gone. The pregame at 7 Eastern, first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and ESPN Radio.